Greetings, this is Travel Jazzman Scholar. In addition to being a teacher, I'm also a musician. I worked for many years as a musician. That was all I did for a while. And I didn't get into music I was a musician as a child. I studied classical piano for 10 years, but I didn't get into jazz, into improvisation until much later in my life, in my late 20s, which is kind of a late start, but I had a lot of motivation because during my 20s I became a big appreciator of jazz and of improvised music, and I used to go listen to a handful of musicians in the Los Angeles area who I really loved, and I was also at that time, I had been practicing a little bit of meditation, and I was able to kind of calm and focus and close my eyes, and I would get very deeply into the music, and I had a series of experiences that really were the motivation for me to become a musician, to say I want to be doing this as well as just listening to it. I want to be invested in it on a real tangible, sensual level. I wanted to be connected to music much more deeply than I was, so I wanted to play it. But what motivated me was an experience I began to have in my early 20s of what I can only describe as a synchronistic sense of music. And what I mean by that is I would listen to an improviser, and if I was very calm and able to close my eyes and really focus, I would begin to sense in the improvised line. Now, improvisation, of course, is music that's never been played that way before. It's an expression in the moment by the artist. So it's never been heard, and it'll never be heard again unless it's recorded. But I would begin to have a sensation in my vocal cords as I was breathing of my vocal cords vibrating in synchrony with the melodic line being played by the improviser. And there was a couple of musicians who could really elicit that response in me, and I became a real fan of theirs. One piano player I used to hear twice a week for almost a year, for 3-4 hours each of those nights during that week when I was in grad school my first time. But I would begin to relax, and I could feel my vocal cords vibrating along with the music. That was sort of the first level that I got to of a sense of, wow, I'm almost feeling as if the music's coming out of me as I breathe. Then I began to allow myself to very quietly hum along with the music. And I would have a sense, if I was very calm and relaxed and I wasn't reflecting, because the minute I reflected on the experience, I lost the experience. So there could be no cognitive interference, or I would lose that sense that I was singing along. And I began to have the sense that I was singing along with the music. And the deeper I got into my meditative state listening, the more clearly my vocal cords were not only responding to the lines I was hearing, but felt as if I began to have the sense that the music was coming out of me, that the intention of the melodic line felt like my intention. I became so synchronized with the moment of expression that I actually had a similar emotive feeling as the artist. At least that was my assumption. I couldn't say. This often went to yet another level of experience, which I can say I haven't had for a while. I sort of lost this ability somewhat once I became a player myself, because I began to become very analytical. So the mind became more invested in the process, and it was very hard for me to relax and listen as a purely intuitive appreciator. But the level that I used to get to, and on occasion I can get there, is I would actually lose all sense, physical sense of my body, and I would become the pure sound. I actually had an experience of loss of the senses except for sound, and sound would no longer be an auditory thing, it would become a full sensual, where my entire living, breathing organism felt as though it were the sound coming into the space. It was a tremendously evocative sensation, and it was what compelled me to say I must go deeper, I must study this music. And I still have quasi-synchronistic experiences. I wanted to share one. I recorded a friend of mine was performing a live concert, and I was relaxing and breathing, and I was beginning to have a little bit of the sense of that, so I got out my iPhone and I recorded myself. This is a very poor representation overall of the experience, but it captures fragments of what I'm referring to. And I say it's a poor example because I wasn't in the very deep synchronistic space. I was kind of going in and out of that first level of feeling as though the sound's coming out of me. At some later time, I'd like to do some more sort of qualitative experiments where I could really attempt to assess the degree to which I can be synchronistic with an improvisation that's happening in the moment. My explanation for this, well, if I believe what some of the physicists say, is they argue that time is experienced in a linear way, some of the more sort of metaphysicists, but within the sciences, that time is experienced in a linear fashion because we have no capacity to experience all of time at once, but that time is actually all happening at once. Now, I don't spend a lot of time bothering with these sort of metaphysics. But I am intrigued by the reality that not only is my sense of the music very synchronistic, but the musicians inevitably, the ones that I know well, when I'm able to get into that very quiet meditative space where I experience the music on a deep level, it tends to somehow energize the music. So there seems to be a connection there between me and the musician and myself that is sort of transcends what we can define in a physical way. And like I said, I'm not a metaphysician. I don't spend a lot of time bothering with these things. But with respect to music, I've always been fascinated with this experience of synchronistically feeling the sounds and being audibly able to express them in the moment. Now, the example I will play for you is, like I said, it's not a great example, but it's about a minute long, 10 seconds, and it has moments where my voice is in synchrony with the musician. I should say this was recorded in real time during a live performance. I didn't come back and overdub my voice. This is me singing along during a concert last August 2010. So here's this example. So that's the small recorded example, and I'm not going to claim that it definitively proves anything, but it was exciting for me to listen back because I'd never attempted to record it, and I know that I wasn't in a deep enough space to get a representative sample, but I got enough of it for me to know that there were many lines where I don't think I could have known where he was going melodically, and I was able to follow it. Those were small excerpts from like a 4-minute solo, and the rest of the solo, I'm pretty close, but some of it was very, very fast, and I'm sort of just breathing, and those were the most representative. So, tribal jazzman scholar suggesting that there's more to music than meets the eye, and improvised music in particular, coming from a purely intuitive state, seems to have the capacity, at least for me, as an appreciator more often than not, it allows me to step into that experience in a way that really defies anything I can explain, and I don't bother trying to explain it much. I just appreciate that I have had that experience and continue to have it in small doses. Music is quite a magical phenomenon. We don't understand much of it in terms of how it moves us, but it's a powerful, powerful media, and I feel blessed that I'm able to play it and appreciate it the way I do. And with that, Tribal Jazzman Scholar, we're signing off. Thanks for joining me.